Hi, everyone, and welcome to Geek Speak Louder Than Nerds, a weekly rewatch podcast for TV shows, movies, and this week, conclusive evidence that the wing speed velocity of an unladen sky bison depends very heavily on whether it's African or European. My name is Mike Hilty.
And I'm Nick Farrow.
How you doing today, Nick?
You got that in one. I'm very proud of you.
How dare you?
It's a lot of words, and sometimes we both have issues with that.
In my defense, I rewatched the episode last night, and
Yeah.
also I actually read the script today.
Ooh.
I came prepared.
Oh, you're a little more prepared than me. I wrote the script and I didn't even reread it.
I, I mean, it's different when you write the script. You know it like at least a little bit better.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm trying to do something new. I'm trying to be a little more get to the next point, make it more of an outline, so that way it's our conversations can be a little more flowy. I don't know. This is just me spitballing in the moment. Speaking of spitballing in the moment, we are embarking on a new journey, and we are tackling a new show. And this time it's a show that everybody else can just watch all at once, but we're going to take it week to week with the new Avatar: The Last Airbender. But before we kick into that, we thought it would be fun to talk about our experience with the property as a whole, the animated series. Yes, we can
And
mention allegedly was a movie that got made a few
that
years
movie,
back.
we are going to call that movie Baltimore because we are not going to be mentioning that movie's name
But
at
that's
all.
the name of Ahsoka's ship. We can't call it the same thing.
Okay, then we'll call it. Okay,
That movie.
no, we're we're not going to do that. We're not going to make the same mistake Ahsoka did, and then we're going to give it a name.
Okay.
We just
That
got to think.
shitty movie.
No, we'll
No, it
we'll
is.
we'll figure it out. But anyways, so I'll go first. I didn't watch it when it came out because I
Was an
there was
adult.
there's that, but also it was on Nickelodeon. It was like I don't know. But then also I have a thing where if something is so incredibly hyped up that I cannot believe it will meet expectations because it's burned me too many times when all my friends were like Johnny Darko and Boondock Saints are the greatest movies ever, and then when I watch them, like they're perfectly fine. Like what? These are not the greatest movies ever. Am I the problem? No, you all are the problem for overhyping this way too much.
That's me and Napoleon Dynamite. I
There you go.
do not get that movie, and everyone loves it.
I get a moment of it. That dance was cool, but
Oh, it had lost me by that point.
well, there's
I
that,
was I
but
was too far gone.
yeah. So,
I hate that dance. I,
but
I I like when they shot the cow in front of the bus full of school children. That was genuine laughter.
Jesus, Jesus. Okay,
The metaphor for the movie.
I was not. I was not. This is something that was always on the radar because so many people were saying that this was a great show. So last year for Scribe Magazine, who I've since, retired, I wrote an article for them last year because Avatar: The Last Airbender was celebrating their 20-year anniversary of their premiere. So I said, you know what? Fine. I'm going to try this out. I'll give it at least a season and see if this is as good as everyone says that it is. And it turns out it is. It's that good. And it is, to me, one of the best TV shows of all time. Not like animated or kids shows or anything like that, bar none, full stop. It's easily probably at minimum in my top 20. I don't think it's going to crack my top 10, but it's definitely up there in terms of how good it is.
Yeah, I kind of am right there with you. Almost exactly the same story because it came out when I was in college, like high
Yep.
school, end of high school, beginning of college. It just I heard about it. It sounded good, but like it just wasn't something for me at the time. Back then, especially, it's not like we could just pop it on streaming, watch it whenever we wanted. It was like you had to go seek it out. You maybe had to buy the DVDs, and I was about to go buy DVDs for a show that I had never seen. So I didn't get to it until they put it on Netflix, which what was the height of the pandemic, like that summer of 2020. They were like, and guess what? Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's on Netflix. Yeah. So I added it to the list. I started watching it with the kids. My oldest fell in love with it immediately. She ended up jumping ahead and watching the whole. By the time I finished the series, she had already watched it twice and was almost done with Korra. So like she plowed through that series and loved it, loved every second of it. And by the time I did eventually get to the end, I was right there with her. I'm like, you're right. This is one of the best shows of all time. And it's a combination of like it has great world building, the lore and the storytelling is on point, but it's also a show that has fun with its characters. It lets you live in the moments. There are episodes where it's not a we need to get to the next thing so that we could get to the end of the story. It's like, hey, let's hang out in Ba Sing Se for a day and do just crazy stuff. Like, let's dedicate time to the non-speaking animal characters. Let's dedicate time to these two characters going off on a little mini adventure. Like, it builds everything up in such a way that by the end, it earns that Ember Island players episode or whatever it's called, where they go and they watch the play of themselves. Like no other show could get away with that and be as earnest and as hilarious and as meta as that episode was.
John and Mary, husband and wife, bringing home a brand new life. His name is Sammy. I'm Big Brother Dean.
What in the holy, if there is a case, you think?
It's the writers saying like, hey, listen, we hear what you're saying. Like, we too have those concerns. We think this is funny, but also have a good time with it. And it's just, to me, it's like the perfect coda of the show. Like we're serious when we need to be, we're fun and goofy when we need to be, and we're not afraid to be the extreme of either side. Like it has some of the goofiest episodes ever, but it also has some of the most like heart-wrenching, like, oh my God, episodes ever too. So
Agree.
it's great in every way.
Yeah, the characters are all great. You see a lot of progression with them. And unlike a lot of kid shows, particularly of the time, there's some heavy stuff in here.
Yeah.
This group, they fail a bunch of times. And I think I appreciated that, particularly the end of that second season. I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be important for them in the long run, the way that this ended. I appreciated that. And this trio of kids, because that's what they are at the end of the day. They're kids. What they go through is a really great adventure, and they encounter a lot of great people along the way. There's a lot of like memorable characters and memorable villains in this as well. I do believe that the series finale of this is probably among one of the best that there's ever going to be. I have one hang up about it, but I think a lot of people share that
very
hang up.
end of the end.
You totally have the hots for Aunt Robin.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
You're grounded.
Wow, you were really into Aunt Robin.
You're grounded too.
Yeah.
So,
but
certainly is divisive from what I understand.
It is certainly divisive. When I watched it, I was like, oh. And then when I thought about it more, I was like, oh.
Ew.
I would put up this trio of characters, Aang, Katara, and Sokka, as among one of the best trios of characters out there. I mean, I get it. They're not as good as Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth, and or whatever Orlando Bloom.
Will Turner, you put some damn respect on his name. You're right. They are a great trio. However, it's so funny. Like I'm gonna get into it probably many times. Like take a shot every time Nick mentions that we don't get to see Toph this season. But like I feel like the introduction of Toph is the perfect introduction of a character. She is my favorite character of the show. And so like to me, it's not a trio, it's a quad. They are the four best characters together. And it sucks so bad that we're not gonna see her this season in the live action show.
do you add Zuko to the mix at the end?
I would, but he wasn't he it was more of a final season ad, and I absolutely would given more time. Like and that's why it sucks that this show's only 3 seasons. I guess that's a perfect segue
That's-
into, but that's not all.
You know?
We got the announcement a couple days ago or last week or something. They're doing 3 movies set years after the series. They're going to be animated. The first one's coming out in October of 2025, and it's going to be our core Avatar crew as like 20 to 30 somethings and in adulthood going on an adventure. So they're going to be adults now, and we're going to get to spend time with these characters. And if it was up to me, I'm sure they're going to do this. There will most likely be flashbacks to when they were younger as well, because they can do it. So I'm looking forward to this a whole heck of a lot. Are you not? Your face
So-
says you're not.
First of all, this is an audio podcast, so I can make whatever kind of face that I want. But more importantly, you just got to make it a good story. That's all I care about. I don't need a cursed child situation. Like, am I going to be there at the end of the day? Yes, I will be there. And it also depends on who's involved with it, because if M. Night
Yeah.
Shyamalan's involved in it, I'd be like, no, thank you.
No,
Like,
I don't think he's legally allowed to go anywhere near this franchise. They filed a restraining order on him years ago.
I'm not gonna lie. I was concerned about the live action series on Netflix as soon as the original creators jumped ship.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on this very podcast. That was concerning. And after seeing the first episode, I'm curious, like, what was it that made them want to? Like, where, like, I'd love to hear just an interview with them, just a full explanation of why we decided to part ways.
That is
Maybe they were afraid that it was just too similar. Like they wanted to tell new stories, and because this feels like a straight up remake. At times it's almost shot for shot. So like there's always going to be that question of why if we're not going to, but then they do take some liberties. They do make it a little different. So I don't know. But we can why don't we get into it? What do you think? Should we get into this week's episode?
Sure, let's do it. This week we will be watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, Episode 1, Aang.
Air, water, earth, fire, fan and sword.
Once upon a time.
Now this is a story all about how.
Have you ever had a dream you want to do so much you could do anything?
I didn't ask for your whole life story.
So right off the top, congrats to IMDb for speculating that the first episode would have the same title as the animated series, and then not to bother to change it until this week. So
yeah,
thanks a lot, IMDb.
Jerks.
This
what did we said it was. I put in the previous week's script that it was the boy in the ice.
that would be a bit much to mirror the show that closely, but whatever. It's fine. We'll get into concerns
but
about
on the
that.
Converse side, terrible title.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Like, really, Aang. I was half expecting the second episode to be called Katara. Like, is that what we're just gonna do? We're just gonna name it after the characters?
Characters, cities, whatever.
Well, before we actually jump in, did you watch past episode 1?
I watched episode 2 just in case we were that, but
I did not watch episode 2 because I figured we'd be fine to record that on Monday. But yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna only watch them before we record. I'm not going to jump ahead. And if I really start to get that itch and I'm just like, I need my stuff, give it to me in my veins, I'm just going to turn on the animated series and I'll watch from there. And there was a small part of me that was like, I'm going to watch the animated series
at the
with
same
it
time,
so that I could then kind of do some comparisons. But then I was like, no, you're far enough removed from your first viewing of the animated series. Why don't we just watch the show as it is? And that way you can kind of feel your feelings and not be like instantly comparing.
Mm-hmm. I know inevitably I'm going to have to rewatch the animated series because I'm doing that for the Sip Pop Writers Room. So I'm looking forward to that. The only reason why I went ahead to the second episode was I wasn't sure when we were going to record it. But
that's fair.
I will commit. I will also do this week to week. I feel like Netflix missed out on an opportunity to make this week to week.
I
just
agree.
You'll get nothing unlike it.
The series opens up with a scene so shrouded in darkness it would make Game of Thrones blush.
Yeah.
We see a dude holding a scroll being chased by a bunch of firebenders, and this guy immediately starts earthbending. I thought that part was really cool.
I did too. I mean, from what I could see, it was really dark. I had to turn the brightness on my TV all the way up just to kind of get an idea. But I mean, earthbending's cool, man.
Earthbending's really cool. And not only that, it was just a great way to introduce that these people
got powers, y'all.
Can fight.
It's the lightsaber problem though. Like I kept thinking about it the whole time. Like, why can you get hit with a blast of fire and be all right? Like what determines okay blasts of fire and killing blasts of fire? Because we'll see later, some guys get it like right in the chest, and it's like there's a bloody fiery hole in their chest, and others it just like glances off them like, ow, that hurt a little.
Well, one could argue the same thing with the earthbending as well, because I don't know if you know this, but rocks are really, really hard.
And he turned them into like bullets, and he like fired them all at them. Like, oh my God.
Let's just put it this way. If this was on HBO, all these people would be dead.
Right?
Like,
oh my God. Can you imagine how violently bloody this show would be on HBO?
I mean, wouldn't that kind of make a little bit of sense? Because I'm sorry, if I was an earthbender, I would just take 2 slabs of rock and just go up to people like my enemies and just sandwich them. Be like, boom, you're dead. Down an alley, he goes to try and meet with his buddy waiting on a pair of chocobos. Unfortunately for our runner, he is not fast enough and he's knocked down by a ball of fire.
Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
He decides to throw the scroll and orders his friend to take it to the Earth Kingdom to warn them of the impending Fire Nation attack. The chocobo guy takes off as the main guy makes a wall with his earthbending. Then a flurry of quick cuts and fast motions, and then we're treated to an Earth versus Fire fight. The fight is over quick, though, as we cut to the Earthbender being brought before the Fire Lord Sozin. He's acting pretty cocky for a dude captive in enemy territory, but Sozin shuts him down pretty quick. The guy thinks it's too late for Sozin. The Earth Kingdom will be ready for his attack now, but Sozin is like, good!
Now all of China knows you're here. Perfect.
You see, it was always his plan to have everyone distracted. That way no one will notice his actual plan. He grabs the Earthbender by the wrist and sets his fire powers to charbroil.
I mean, this is the worst way to cook anything, because you get that gross charcoal taste, and it's just, you gotta grill it.
You don't like things charbroiled?
No, not particularly, especially my Earthbenders.
I wonder if those girls in yellow jackets, they kind of have different ways to do that. None of them are firebenders, though.
You get a good wood burning going, it's so much better.
Obviously, what everyone wanted here was tips on how to properly cook people.
Hey, nowadays with the price of groceries, you can't rule it out.
Putting the proper way to cook an earthbender aside, Sozin's advisor guy is like, is it really that smart to go after the airbenders? It's not that strategic. But Sozin doesn't care about the airbenders so much that he cares about one in particular. Now you can end the scene there and leave the audience with a little bit of wonder, but then the advisor just blurts out, but the avatar is yet to be revealed. Dun dun dun! But Sozin apparently went to Batfleck's School of Determining Threats.
If we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
So I liked this scene. Do you remember if there was a scene like this in the original? I don't think there was.
There was not.
No, I didn't think so.
And this is partially what I was looking forward to. The way that they tell it in the animated series is they go through it pretty quick. They don't dive deep into this. And it's more generic. This makes it a little bit more personal. And this kind of ups the stakes and shows a little bit more about why the Fire Nation feels that they should be the ones that do this.
Yeah, it's a proper prologue. It's kind of like the original series was making it up on the fly. So now that they have the whole book in front of them, they didn't have the luxury of having the story already ready to go. I can make a whole scene that does that. And I like that about this. My only hang up was just feel like the writing was, it was like a Hollywood producer was like, I don't get it. can you make a few lines that explains it better? And it's just like, buddy, like we get it. Just because you don't get it doesn't mean the audience as a whole won't get it. Like the advisor guy, like every line that he had was a pointless line.
Oh, yeah.
When they're running through the streets, there's that point where the guy earth bends, and then one of the guards goes, "An earth."
Thank you. We understand what is going on. I would venture a guess that at minimum, most people should at least be somewhat familiar
Yeah.
with this. But for the people out there who are like, oh, that guy earthbends,
They don't need it.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. The CGI in this is
It's a little wonky, but only in the sense that it's clear that they're hiding the budgetary restraints. And that this is the first episode. So I wonder if maybe they're saving their budget for later episodes of the season. But honestly, as far as TV shows CGI goes, there was only one scene that really had me going, ugh. Otherwise, it was pretty mid. Nothing to write home about, but nothing terrible. Like there was a couple moments where I was like, oh, they're not on a river, they're on a green screen.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
otherwise, this opening scene, they did a good job of hiding the bad CGI in the dark.
And also, it does kind of bum me out, all the quick cuts when it comes to the
right.
action scenes, because that happens a little bit later as well.
Yeah, it does. I don't know if this is like a stunts thing or if it's just we're hiding the budget thing.
I don't know.
It got a little distracting.
Like overall, I generally agree with you. The things that I didn't like about this opening scene are ticky-tack at best. That doesn't change the fact that the fight sequences were cool despite all the clunky dialogue of like, oh, explanation that this guy's an earthbender, because if you can't figure that out, I have to spoon feed this to you.
Right. It's just so obnoxious because it's just so condescending. Like in the very next scene, we are told about Aang and his airbending, and we get the words airbender. So we go, oh, okay, so he controls air. That other guy controlled the ground, so he's a different kind of bender. Those other guys controlled fire. Okay, like it's something that you could just naturally come to. You don't need a character on screen to say it, and it's just kind of insulting otherwise. It's like, God damn it, I'm not an idiot. You could have cut that line and showed me 30 seconds more of those adorable pig chickens.
So yeah, ticky-tack stuff aside, I did like this. And to be perfectly honest, I could have used a whole episode. I think one of my complaints about this, I have a feeling this is going to become an issue, is that the first season, 20 episodes, half an hour apiece, a lot happens in that time. And one of the things that I give the animated show a lot of credit for is that there's not a lot of wasted time in it, meaning that it's not like we have a bottle episode where, nothing happens. And if something does kind of go a little bit off the rails, it all comes back to the story at some point. Like, hey, Aang needs to recharge. Nothing wrong with that. Let's go on some fun adventure. Or, hey, casual reminder, these are kids we're dealing with, so let them have a little bit of fun from time to time as they go on a quest to fulfill their destinies to save the world. Let them have a little bit of fun from time to time. I could have used a little bit more of this because this next scene as well was really interesting.
Yes. Well, this next scene, I'm assuming you're talking about the faux opening. Yeah. So it kicks off to an expositional scene. And if you've seen the original animated series, it does the whole earth, water, wind, fire, heart.
I am Captain Planet.
They go through that, only it's not what we're used to. It actually kind of gives more of the backstory. It's like an opening for 100 years in the past. Like, this is the story they tell now. Like, it's the story of the avatars, what they do, what their purpose is. And I particularly liked how they showed, we got a bit of Avatar Kyoshi joining her fellows on the stairs, and you could see the other avatars, and like I was looking and I'm like, hey, I recognize those guys from the shows and the backstory and the lore. And it's also a bit of a double-edged sword because I feel like this scene, as cool as it was it's just more exposition and unnecessary dialogue. Like they repeat almost exactly what the Fire Lord was just talking about with his advisor. And then later on, they kind of repeat it again. So it's like it's a repeated beat. It only concerns me because like the reports have been like, why do they keep cutting out all of this good stuff from the show? And everyone's like, oh, because we needed to cut for time. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Because, like, to your point, they allow in the animated show, they allow the kids to just be kids every once in a while. And it's not so much of a wasted episode as it is a character driven episode. It gives you time. And my fear is that they're going to lose some character work. But I don't want to jump too far ahead because we don't know what'll happen yet. So they do their explanations and they give us our title card. We then cut to a scene of Aang, our main character, at the top of a tower in the airbending kingdom, Southern Isles, or whatever they like to call it. He gets called down by a monk Gyatso. And this is where we are privy to what I think is the absolute worst bit of digital effects. Aang flying down from the top of that tower looked awful on my TV. Good news for everybody who doesn't watch things on TVs anymore, though. When I rewatched it on my iPad, it didn't look nearly as offensive. So I don't know if maybe it was just because the TV blows it all up and you can see it real clear that, like, oh, that's like rubber Neo floating through a green screen environment. Like I don't know. It just didn't look good on the TV. But this is the only time where I'm gonna sit there and go, oh my God, that looked awful. Like what were they thinking? How did they let this get the camera? Like the rest looks pretty good. Once he does make it to the ground, Gyatso starts giving him crap for skipping school again. Aang is clearly one of those gifted kids who's, beyond the material, and Gyatso knows this, but he's not ready to tell Aang that he is the Avatar, so, he beats around the bush about it.
You may be more advanced than the others. There's much you have to learn. And believe it or not, there may come a day when you wish you'd spent more time with your teachers.
And as it turns out, the Airbenders share my philosophy of waiting until the last second to clean up before company, because he tells Aang to go off and help the other kids get ready for the festival, because the other Air Nomad tribes start arriving immediately. Like he's like, when are they getting here? And he's like, right now. and then he looks to the sky and there are a ton of appas flying around.
Sky bison.
Sky bison.
A herd of sky bison.
Sky bison.
What's
the of sky bison? I'm going the Aaron Dicer school of naming Star Trek ships. They're all the Enterprise.
Yeah.
They're all just appas. Look at all those appas.
Perhaps a murder of sky bison. Murder of sky bison.
So Aang runs off, and one of the other masters comes up to Gyatso and asks if he told Aang yet, and gets all salty that Gyatso did not yet tell Aang that he is the Avatar. So he says, we got to go meet the council, and Gyatso follows him off.
In his defense, in the council chambers, Gyatso is on team. Hey, maybe we should let Aang be a kid for a little while longer before we tell him he's the Avatar and he's going to be responsible for saving the world. Huh?
Or we could not do that.
So while the other guy in the council is team, yeah, we need the Avatar now, not later. You need to tell him. I don't know why Gyatso is the only one that has to tell him that, probably because they're friends, but I don't understand why he can't go in front of this council similar to Anakin Skywalker in episode 1, be like, you're not the chosen. Unfortunately, the leader of the group makes the call that Aang is gonna have to pack his things and get out. If he doesn't learn his other bending skills soon, they might all be in trouble.
I wanted more from this scene. Like, I really wanted a little bit more of the politics of the day, like, to get involved. Like, they're giving it to us. Why give us just a little snippet?
So this is where I'm kind of having a debate in my head. I don't think I'm going to go as so far to say I think I would want the entire first season to be set up, but I think I could have used more in this episode to be more set up. And it even ending with what happens kind of in like one of these next scenes. I could have used more of that. And I could have used maybe just a little bit more exploration of, okay, here's how all of this started. And I think it just would have been a really cool thing to showcase some of the cool action pieces
Yeah.
if you get all of these benders together. I even could have used a little bit more of like, here's some stuff from past avatars,
Yeah.
just to give us a little bit of context for that. But also, that's a little bit pandering to all the stupid people. But for me, I think I would have appreciated just a little bit more time with.
Well, there's a
with all
difference
these
between pandering and world building. And I think you can write world building into a scene like this in a way that isn't looking at the audience and saying, and here's what happened. Like, here's a great example of how they could have done a little bit better with this scene. So later on, the leader, we say leader with a question mark because was he? He seems to may have the final say in this meeting, but like, did you even see him get involved in the final attack? Like, they really focused on that one female bender master who does the big tornado later on. And she doesn't say a word in this council meeting, but yet she's given like a huge moment where she's like defending the bridge with her cool airbending moves. And that leader guy, we don't see him do anything of note. If we see him at all, it's a quick,
Oh no, he died!
that was it. I'm like, who was that guy? Why is he making this call? If we're never going to see him, like, I was like, oh, this guy's going to be a badass and we're going to see him fight later. Nope, you will not. Do not worry about it at all. And it's little things like that. Like, I'm almost wondering if maybe there was a scene they just cut for time. I don't know. So we head on over to the temple of Yang Chen, the previous airbender avatar, and Aang and Gyatso are chatting about the upcoming Comet Festival when Gyatso turns the conversation to how the avatar cycles work, just in case you forgot from the opening scene. In case you forgot, the last avatar was from the Fire Nation. The avatar before that was from the Water Nation.
This is ridiculous.
Hey everybody, Avatar Kyoshi here.
And the avatar before that was from the Air Nation, Master Yang Chen. So that means the next avatar will be from the Air Nation again. Are you seeing what I'm saying to you, Aang?
I'm glad that these rules have been established, that there needs to be a rotation system instead of just choosing the best person that could be for this role.
They kind of give us that basic, that's how it works. It's always going to work that way. Oh, and by the way, buddy, it's you. You're the avatar. And Angus, like, I'm sorry. Old man say what now? Because he's not really all for this bit of news. Aang wants to be a kid. He doesn't want to have that kind of responsibility. But unfortunately, the Fire Nation is getting all uppity. And so Gyatso explains that we've got to fast track your learning now, bud, because we don't have the luxury of you just getting to be a kid anymore. Like, listen, man, I tried, but those other guys, they didn't want to listen to me. So, but he tells them, like, we're always going to be friends. You're just because you go off and you do your other training, like, that's not going to change anything. And one day you'll understand this. And we will always be friends. As he looks into the camera and you realize this is him planning for his future. And that's never a good sign for characters in TV shows. So, but Aang is still troubled by this. So a little later on, he's just kind of hanging out outside, watching the comet pass through the sky. When Appa Actual comes in for his big introduction, Aang starts talking to Appa as he comes over, and he tells him he doesn't think he can stop a war. He'd rather just play games and eat food, which I'm like, yes, hashtag my Aang. He just wants to play and eat food, but he's scared of his power and he doesn't want this responsibility. The solution, of course, is let's get out of here, man. Let's go for a drive.
What are we gonna do?
Road trip.
So he hops on Appa's back and they get out of Dodge for a little while.
Obviously, they picked the perfect time to do that. So
Right.
as Aang is flying off, a battalion of firebenders led by Sozin sneaks up on the air tribe, Sky Island, and begin their attack. They Iron Man their way to the top of the floating mountains and start blasting anyone and everything in their path. Gyatso starts gathering the students as the other airbenders defend their home, but he can't find Aang. Way to go, buddy. You had one job. Well, I guess, suppose he did have one job. He told him that he was the Avatar. No other responsibility was given to him.
Gyatso tells Aang he's the Avatar, looks at him, he goes, "We'll always be friends." And then he turns in his gun and his badge. Because he was one day away from retirement.
We get to see some really cool fight sequences between the air and the firebenders. I want to see more stuff like this because the confluence between all of these different groups and how they fight against one another, because let's face it, fire destroys a lot. But guess what? Fire, it needs air to survive. So fire can't do a whole lot with air or water or earth, if we're being perfectly honest. So yeah, it's interesting to see all these different groups fight. It's something that I'm looking forward to more throughout the course of this series. And I'm just looking forward to the creative ways they use this. Like, for example, one lady from the council starts a tornado when the kids in Gyatso run to the temple. Stuff like that is really cool. Is interesting.
Creative ways to use magic is always preferable to just shooting lights at each other with your wand or magical ropes. Like, it doesn't visually look stunning when you know that they can do more. What can an earthbender do? They can control the earth. So can they turn the rocks into sand and make a sandstorm with it? The airbenders clearly have some limited flight capabilities, which is cool. And they're like, the robes are kind of flowy in a way that would assist with that. Like, firebenders can, when we get to Azula eventually, firebenders can do a lot of cool shit. So like, I'm very excited as well. Like, let's go. What can we do in a live action medium that will stand you out from, because like animation, you can do pretty much whatever the mind can think of. Can they equally do that in live action? And this first scene implies yes, they can, and it'll be fun.
So the airbenders are not faring well in their fight, unfortunately, because I don't know if you know this, fire burns and air doesn't. There's enough charbroiling to make Burger King blush. BK, have it your way. Sozin attacks the tornado lady simply by lighting the tornado on fire, and they proceed to the temple with Gyatso and the students. We see a brief cut of Aang and Appa's flight over the ocean, where there's a massive storm going on, and they're having trouble avoiding the giant wave, and they get hit and start sinking. Back at the temple, Gyatso puts up quite the fight from the stormtrooper firebenders, but when Sozin gets there, he's no match.
You may have prevailed on another night, but not when we have the power of the comet.
I gotta say, for an old guy like Gyatso, the guy has moves. I did appreciate that. I could have used a little bit more, but, you know, he gets his one shining moment. As Sozin torches Gyatso, we cut back to Aang and Appa drowning when suddenly Aang's tattoo starts to glow as he enters the avatar mode and freezes himself and Appa in a ball of ice to save themselves from drowning. I don't think I'm a huge fan of showing the avatar state right off the bat. They do it a couple of times this episode. I don't want to say it like kind of cheapens it a little, but I think at the end of the day, I don't think enough time has passed that he's actually earned entering the avatar state right now.
You would prefer that he takes it to dinner first before he pulls out his avatar state?
I prefer that he learns a little bit more about the avatar state before going into it.
Well, I mean, I think it was pretty clear he's not in control of it. Like,
well, no,
this is kind of like a fight or flight reflex. Like, it almost feels like it's Kyoshi, take the wheel. And she's like, oh shit, this kid can't die just yet.
The avatar state is a defense mechanism.
How hilarious would that have been? Just like, oh, we messed up, didn't we? We shouldn't have given this power to a 12-year-old. Maybe we should have given it to, I don't know, an adult.
Well, I mean, but they don't give the power to anybody. When the avatar dies, their spirit goes into a child being born. So, like, that was actually going to be my next question. What was Sozin's plan? Because if Aang were to have been killed, unless it was not to kill Aang, but to capture him, and just to keep him held prisoner, like, you know, let him grow up to be an old man. They were kind of torching people with reckless abandon. So it almost felt like they were just like, kill them all. So if they killed Aang, he would be reincarnated into the next one, which, if I remembered my avataring correctly, would have been the Water Tribe. So is that the goal then? They go and they wipe out the Water Tribe? I mean, but like, it's just going to keep happening. I guess then, well, you kill the water one, and then you kill the earth one, and then it's back to fire, and like, well, he's one of us. So, I don't know. I guess then that maybe that was his plan. Like if we kill enough people, we'll eventually get the Avatar back in the Fire Nation.
But then at that point, doesn't the Avatar have the responsibility to stop the fire tribe?
But if you're being indoctrinated into the fire way of life, like the Avatar's just taught as a kid, like other nations bad, we in charge. You can learn their stuff, but only because you want to save the Fire Nation and be the rule. I don't know. It sounds like a crazy plan. It actually would make more sense if Sozin's plan was to capture the Avatar and just keep him alive and drip feed him food, but just like keep him at a weakened state forever until he eventually dies and you can solidify your rule. But I don't know. That might have been a better plan.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So the next day, or possibly 100 years later, we open on a young girl in a wintry outfit manipulating a puddle of water. She gets up and leaves, and it's revealed that she's actually inside the belly of a beached sea vessel. She looks out over what we are told is Wolf Cove, a small village on an icy tundra. And this is where I had to stop because I'm like, it's Katara. We know it's Katara. Do I introduce her as Katara, or do I wait for the show to introduce her to me as Katara? Because there are people watching for the first time who wouldn't necessarily know that her name is Katara.
They did it with literally every other character in this episode, but they conveniently, kind of glossed over that with her until a little bit later, which
they waited a few minutes.
Which I found a bit of an odd choice.
Yeah, I was expecting like when she got to Sokka. So she rolls up on Sokka, bossing around a group of kids, teaching them to be soldiers.
I gotta pee.
Listen, until your fathers return from the war, they're counting on you to be the men of this tribe. And that means no potty breaks.
But I really gotta go.
And she's like, "Hi, Sokka, how are you?" And he just kind of looks at her and he just starts talking. And there's no like, "Hey, Katara, my sister who I love." It wasn't until like the end of that interaction that he's like, "Come on, Katara." It's implied he's the dude in charge of the village's defenses, and there doesn't appear to be any adults. They're all either kids or elderly in this place. So when Sokka needs an adultier adult to do things, there are none. It's him. He's the adultier adult. And it's very clear. I mean, he's doing his darndest, but he's still kind of a kid. So he and Katara, they go off because apparently the fishermen in this village suck and they didn't bring home any fish. They were just like, "Well, no fish today."
Well, we tried.
Sokka's just like, "Those idiots, they came back with nothing."
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Yeah, so Sokka slips on the Infinity Gauntlet and takes Katara and a boat, and they go out to try and find themselves some fish. So they're floating down the lazy river, and Sokka wants to know if Katara was waterbending again. She asks why it would matter, and he's just like, "Listen, man, the Fire Nation, they don't like waterbenders because of the whole water bad for fire."
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like, "You got to be more careful about that." Katara isn't quite as concerned because it's not like the Fire Nation would just happen to have a boat nearby that would just happen to pay them a visit anytime soon. So she tells him that an otter penguin could bend more than she could, and that was it for me. The episode could have ended right there because all I could think about was, why are they not showing me what a otter penguin looks like? I want one.
That sounds like the most adorable hybrid creature on the face of the planet.
But I guess this is a good place to insert this here. For those of you listeners who may not have ever seen the show, the world of Avatar is inhabited by creatures that are very much like our creatures. If they were merged with a second different kind of creature. So earlier in the episode, there is a very brief glimpse of what appeared to be chicken pigs. I think they're chicken pigs. Appa, of course, is like a bison, but he's got like 6 legs and he flies. Also, the animals, apparently the bending comes from the animals. So like the sky bison taught the eaters how to make bend air. Some animals can bend water. Some animals can bend earth. So like the crux of it is like 90% of them are all super fucking adorable. Like there are turtle ducks and they're the cutest things in the whole world. Well, Sokka is of the we need to prepare for war camp of thinking, while Katara is more of a there's got to be a better way person. And as they're talking about this, the lazy river suddenly turns into a crazy river, and they are taken down a pretty green screen ice flow where they crash into a cavern and fly out of their boat next to a giant ball of ice. So Katara, trying to use her waterbending powers to get the boat to float back to them so they can get out of there, suddenly everything starts shaking. It gets a little crazy. She seems to not notice it, but Sokka certainly does. And the whole place is just going nuts when suddenly there's a giant explosion and a giant sky beam shoots up into the air. And when that happens, we cut over to the firebending boat that Katara was sure didn't exist, and into the room of a boy writing in his diary, listening to Evanescence, when suddenly the relics on his shelf start glowing. He runs to the deck and sees from the distance the giant sky beam and smiles. Back at the cave, Katara and Sokka see Aang floating in the air, head all aglow, and suddenly he just stops, the light goes away, and he just falls to the ground. Katara is like,
I'll take you home and lock you in a nice little cage.
well, we should definitely take him home with us. And Sokka's like,
no.
Why?
No, we're good. I am not taking this random kid that just appeared out of nowhere, which kind of to Sokka's point, like, we don't know this kid. Like, we're good. We're good. I'm good. Glad to see that Katara is more of a people person.
Bald boys with glowing eyes and floating abilities.
There's no basis for a system of government.
That's fair. I will give you that.
They go back and forth a bit, but it doesn't really take that much for Katara to twist Sokka's arm. And so they load Aang up into their boat. And as they float away, camera pans over the ice where we see Appa starting to crack his way out himself. Which I was like, they could have lingered on that a little bit more because I had to rewind it like 3 times. I'm like, is that what that was? Was it Appa?
So back at the village, Katara, Sokka, and the elders are standing over Aang asleep on a bed like a bunch of creeps when Gran comes in and identifies Aang as an airbender. Sokka doesn't believe it, but they all decide to leave him to rest and get answers when he wakes up. Over on the Fire Nation boat, Prince Zuko is trying to convince Carson, who is undercover for the rebellion, as Zuko's uncle Iroh.
Fortunately, someone I served with in the rebellion is amongst your ranks.
I'm so happy to see Uncle Iroh. They need to head towards the Water Tribe village. Iroh isn't sure that Zuko knows what he's talking about, but Zuko is very convinced that the light is a sign that the Avatar has returned. Zuko is apparently a real fanboy, going to all the conventions and collecting all the Avatar merch that you think we need more of.
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Zuko's on board with me. He's traveled all over the world. He's listened to every story about the Avatar. He is a true fan.
In between listening to his Stained and writing in his diary, Zuko wants to find the Avatar because if he does, his father will let him go home and not be banished anymore. Iroh is concerned that he's just going to get his hopes up only to be once again disappointed.
So then we cut back to the village, and Aang wakes up from a nightmare memory of just before they crashed into the water, and he goes outside and sees a bunch of kids playing. So he runs over to play when Sokka shows up and starts yelling at all the kids for not immediately attacking Aang. He's like, you can't just let people play with you.
You fools.
Right? Aang's a little confused by this, but then suddenly remembers that he wasn't alone and asks about Appa. He gets all concerned and starts flying around calling for Appa.
Have you seen Appa? My sky bison? Sky bison. Sky bison.
Repeating it doesn't help.
Sky bison.
When Katara and Gran and a bunch of others show up and they see Aang flying all about, they're like, holy shit, he is an airbender.
Is Gran that crazy that everyone's like, you don't know what you're talking about? Yes, I will give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because it has been 100 years since that event.
Which Gran looking good for 100 years old, right? Because you'd think if she was let's say she was born the same year that they all died. By the time she was old enough to really know about them, Fire Nation would have had it in place that, like, we don't talk about airbenders. So
we don't talk about airbenders.
No.
We don't talk about airbenders.
But it was her birthday, and her kids all said, "Hey, Grandma, what's an airbender?" So suddenly, Appa does appear, and that distracts everyone even further. And they're like, "Holy crap, a sky bison, an honest-to-God sky bison. Sky bison.
No sky bisons allowed in the sky.
6 little legs, horns on his head. He flies around. If you fall off, you'll be dead."
We don't talk about airbenders. No.
Not a word about airbenders. They take Aang to their meeting tent area, and Aang tells them his story. And when he's done, tells them, "Hey, I live at, I just gotta pop back home real quick because I wasn't supposed to be gone. And, they're gonna be missing me over at those southern air temples with all of my airbender friends." And they're like, "Listen about that."
No, buddy, no.
So then Gran goes into the original Avatar: The Last Airbender creed of the actual
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the 4 nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
and the Avatar disappeared when we needed him most. So yeah, buddy, you don't know that story. That means you. But she holds back and she looks directly at the camera and says, "You are the last airbender." That's the name of the TV show.
Back on the boat, a couple firebenders are talking shit about Zuko behind his back, and this just turns out to be a rookie mistake.
He's right behind me, isn't he?
So as punishment, Zuko makes them listen to a long-winded speech about duty and destiny and proving themselves worthy. While Zuko is boring his minions to sleep, Aang is hanging out on the roof. Katara asked if he's okay, and he's just in shock that it's been 100 years-ish, and how everyone he knows is gone. Katara, ever the one-upper, tells Aang about the Fire Nation attacking their village and killed her mom and all the waterbenders. Sometimes we just need people to listen.
Right?
Sometimes all you need to say is, "That sucks, dude."
And it's made worse by the fact that the comparison is just not even there. Because all Aang has to do is say, oh, really, Katara? So everyone you've ever known and loved is absolutely going to be dead due to the fact that people tend to not live past 100 years old? Not cool, Katara. Not cool at all.
And also kind of a shit thing to say to somebody who's lost everything when your brother is in the village with you.
My brother, Sokka, down there? You've seen my brother. Hey, Sokka! Hey, wave to us. We're up here on the roof. Tell Aang about how we lost a couple of the people we love. Can you do that? Sokka? Aang lost everybody, but we know what that's like.
We also know what it's like to be potentially thrust into the responsibility of being the Avatar.
All right.
I can kind of earth, or I can kind of waterbend. You can't. Sokka, my brother, who's right over there, doesn't know shit about bending anything.
I mean, it's not a competition, but I've been through a lot. My father killed my mother, and then I had to kill my father. That was hard. Probably even harder than having to kill a sister.
She then gives him the news update of the world. The Earth Kingdom is holding strong, and the Water Tribe in the north is still fighting back, but otherwise the Fire Nation owns everything. Back on the fireboat, though, Zuko is practicing his fire flips because he puts all of his minions to sleep in his speech, and Iroh asked, "What exactly is the plan here, Phil? What are we doing? What's going on?" Because it doesn't sound like... It sounds like Zuko had the plan, we're going to find the Avatar. And that's as far as it went.
This is an underpants known plan. Step 1, find the Avatar. Step 3, profits.
What do you do with the Avatar at that point?
Even Iroh's like, but your dad doesn't think you're gonna. So he's like, get out, go do this thing, idiot. He's never gonna do that thing. So he might be a little less than welcoming even if you do come back with the Avatar. So let's assume that things don't go as you think they're going to go. What do you want to do then? Which I like that about Iroh. He is a strategist, and I'm sure like we'll get into Iroh's whole situation as the show goes on, I'm sure. But like he was like the guy. Iroh, before certain events in his life happened, Iroh was the grand Pumbaa of them all. Iroh at his best could be a scary thing.
I'm hoping for some flashback moments where we see Iroh doing his thing. You know, we will see. We cut back over to Katara and Aang in the belly of the ship, and she shows him that she can waterbend. Aang gives her some pointers about bending, and now she needs to find balance in order to bend. I'm sorry, why is Aang giving her advice on waterbending?
Well, I mean, I think he's just giving her advice on bending in general. Like, that was a question I always kind of had. Like, if you're a master of airbending, what makes the other elements different? I mean, I guess they do kind of like he always has trouble. He had trouble with earthbending because it was like a kind of like a state of mind situation. Like you have to think differently to do the different ones. But like I think at their core, it's kind of like the Force, where it's like, sure, there are ways to manipulate the Force, but at its core, it's still just the Force. And so like if you kind of have the idea of how to use it, you can use it. It's just your own mind is getting in its way.
This bout of mansplaining apparently works because she immediately creates a ball of water and starts moving it about. But she doesn't do it for long because she sees in the distance Zuko's ship approaching.
They rush back to the village where Sokka is preparing his child army to attack when Gran tells them that the firebenders are here for Aang. They ask her why, and she says, well, I was hoping to save this for a very good reveal, but he's the Avatar. The Avatar and the Last Airbender. The Last Airbender who is the Avatar.
Isn't that the name of the show?
That's the name of the show! Gran's just holding out on us.
To pull a CinemaSins, roll credits.
Right, baby. So Sokka is certainly not pleased with this information. He thinks Aang is a big old coward, even though he was there for the Avatar disappeared, but also it's clearly because he was stuck in a ball of ice for 100 years. Like, Sokka's like, we got to turn this guy over, but Katara's like, no, I found him and he's mine now. So
I get to hit you and love you and hug you and squeeze you all up.
You can't just give away my new airbender. Suddenly, Sokka's number 2, the unnamed hero that takes over for him, he comes up and he tells them that you might want to get to the gate. There are firebenders a knocking.
We should call his number 2 Faka, fake Sokka.
I don't think we're ever going to see him again, so it really won't matter, I guess. So at the gate, Zuko and his goons line up, and Zuko tells them that there's somebody there that doesn't belong, and if they turn him over, then they'll leave and not burn down their village.
What a good negotiation tactic.
Every time they make a Robin Hood movie, they burn down this village, so why not just give him over now, and then we can avoid all that. And Sokka's like, I agree, good deal. And he goes to get Aang. But Katara has to convince him, no, we need to not do that because what would Mom want?
You mean the mom that was killed by the Fire Nation Katara used to, relate to Aang?
Exactly, that mom. So your theory presupposes is that Katara's mom is watching from the spirit world going, no, that's not what I say. Send that boy out there. Get rid of him.
Just waving her hands from the no.
I'm with Sokka on this one. Don't you speak for me. How dare you presume? But Katara wins him over, and so Sokka grabs his cool boomerang mace club thing and goes out there to confront Zuko, and he challenges him to one-on-one combat. Winner takes village. But unfortunately, he kind of gets his butt kicked because, as we mentioned earlier, fire burn.
It doesn't burn him entirely, though, because you get a direct hit, and then all of a sudden,
this is one of those times where the fire doesn't burn.
Yeah.
It just knocks over. So Zuko's about to deliver a killing blow to Sokka when Aang he just pops in there. He's like, no, like I'm sure I'm a kid, but like you guys do realize that I'm pretty awesome. So let me show you how awesome I am. And he easily takes out all the minions with a force push and then goes after Zuko. But Zuko's actually pretty good at this too. So he gives his guys enough time to recover and orders them to burn the village down when Aang is like, nope, I surrender. It's fine. Just take me and leave and we'll be good. So Zuko does. He's a man of his word. And he takes Aang and they sail off.
As Katara and Sokka watch the boat sail away, she pleads with him to save Aang, and he agrees. On the boat, Aang is hanging out on the brig when Iroh comes to see him. They exchange pleasantries. I think this was the first of hopefully many conversations that we will see between them, because that was some of my favorite parts of the animated series. Granted, when Iroh talks to anybody, be like, ooh,
yeah,
what's he gonna say? Cool. But Aang asks him ultimately why the Fire Nation would start a war. And Iroh explains that the Fire Nation wants the peace and unity that they have to exist all over the world, and that can only happen under the Fire Nation rule.
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
Aang doesn't understand that peace comes from respecting life, not from killing and destroying it.
Your new empire? Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy!
But Iroh says, it doesn't matter how the war started, what matters is how it ends, and by capturing the Avatar, the Fire Nation can finally end the war.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Will it though?
From Iroh's perspective, the Jedi are evil. So.
I think one thing that gets mentioned here that I do like is Iroh kind of explains how people think that sometimes they think the Fire Nation is just like fire, that in order for something to be done, it needs to consume it. I thought that was a really good explanation for that. Not justifying their behavior, but at least giving people some context and understanding. It's like, well, that's how fire works, so that's kind of how we work too. I also don't agree with that notion. It doesn't matter how it started. Tell that to the Airbenders. See how they feel about how this war started.
Fairly certain they might have some things to say about how it started. And it'll go like this.
Glad to see from an audio podcast you can make your point like that. So before he leaves, he promises to have some jasmine tea sent down to Aang. As they leave, Aang uses the airbending to grab the keys from the guard without them seeing.
Back in the village, Sokka and Katara are ready to leave, and Sokka is hoping they will catch a good current when Katara has a better idea. Smash cut to Sokka screaming as they fly off on Appa, and this was the moment where I was like, all right, I think this show's gonna get it. Like, you've been playing down Sokka's goofiness this episode, which has worked, but like, I needed them to give me something that, like, okay, but we're not cutting Sokka off at the knees. He's going to still be the Sokka you know and love. So this was a nice little touch. But back on the boat, Aang is sneaking around when he hears the faint sounds of My Chemical Romance playing in the next room. And he goes in, it turns out it's Zuko's bedroom, and he finds his diary full of information about past avatars. But he hears someone coming and quickly pockets the diary before getting out of there. But he also sees his little flying stick thingy, or I should say his walking stick that has been just a walking stick since he started the episode. And he grabs it and takes off. He gets up on deck. I guess Zuko noticed that someone was in his room and touched his stuff, because he immediately finds him on the deck and calls his guys out to go get him. But Aang jumps off the boat, and as it turns out, his walking stick is actually a flying stick, and it turns into a glider. So they all open fire on him. Get it? Open fire.
I made it funny.
And one lucky shot nails him and causes Aang to drop his stick glider. And he starts plummeting towards the water because I guess he forgot about the whole being able to fly thing. But before he hits the water, Appa and Sokka catch him and pull him on board. Pissed that once again Aang is getting away, Zuko throws one more big fireball at them. And it's just about to hit when a giant splash of water rises up and blocks it. And everyone looks at Katara in awe of her water-bending skills as Zuko watches them fly away in anger.
Again, this is just another situation where it's like, Zuko, what's the plan here? You captured him, but then you decided to throw a fireball in him midair.
What do you want him to do? You want him to die, or do you not want him to die? Did you maybe want to put some more guards on the Avatar? Like in the cell? You know how he doesn't get those keys? If there's someone there watching him the whole time.
Right. Aang thanks the two for saving him, but they can't go home because now the Fire Nation will just keep chasing them. They decide their first stop should be at the Southern Air Temple. When they get there, the place is an absolute mess, burnt up helmets, and ruins everywhere. They go into the temple and find the skeletal remains of Gyatso. Gotta say, looking pretty good for being dead for over 100 years.
And also the only skeleton to not decompose and disappear, because the place was pretty empty otherwise.
Maybe it's because he was saved by the power of friendship.
The real skeleton was the friends we made along the way.
Absolutely. He thinks back to what Gyatso told him about being strong and kind and generous. But upon remembering this, he goes into the Avatar state again, and his tattoo starts glowing. A giant whirlwind starts to destroy everything around him as Sokka and Katara hang on for dear life. Aang again thinks back to Gyatso's final words to him about he always will be his friend, and that snaps Aang out of it. He calms down and the storm subsides. Katara rushes over and gives him a hug, the kind of hug a mother would give a child. You know?
Yeah, and nothing else, in my opinion.
No, nothing else. This isn't going to be weird at all.
He's my brother.
When everything is calmed down, Aang commits to not letting the air nomad's sacrifice be in vain. He will do what they wanted and complete his training and bring balance to the the world. He tells them that it's only after we've lost something that we do realize how much it means to us and how we do anything to get it back. And as Aang is giving his speech, we see Zuko furiously and obsessively scribbling out a picture of Aang and hanging it on his wall as he catches fire. And his angry Zuko eyes to credits. That's not weird at all, right? The only thing missing...
That seems healthy.
The only thing missing from that is just, a knife just right in the middle of Aang's head. Or maybe a heart? I don't know. Zuko, chill out, man. Relax.
Yeah.
Because
maybe he needs to turn off the Fallout Boy and just cool down.
Yeah, he just needs to turn on like a little newfound glory, and then everything will be just fine.
There you go.
So, what'd you think of this episode?
I liked it. I thought that it did not distract me too much from the fact that I've already seen this story play out. There was enough new in here that it kept me engaged. I think that the production design and the costuming, and they really nailed the look of the original cartoon. I think everything just looks awesome, and I loved looking at it, and it even got me a little at the end with that moment where he's remembering Gyatso, but it kept standing out to me like, for Aang, that was yesterday. So that's gotta be a mind fuck right there. You're just like, it's 100 years, but it was also yesterday.
That wound is still fresh, everybody.
Right? I enjoyed it. The CGI was rough in spots, but not so terrible that I'm like, oh my God. And yeah, other than a few minor exposition dumps, which is to be expected in a first episode, I think they did pretty all right. It was really hard for me to not watch ahead, which I'm looking forward to watching episode 2 later on this afternoon.
Yeah, I generally agree with all of that. I like it. I like the world building of this. Despite some of the cuts for the action sequences, it's cut to death. I did enjoy them a lot. I thought some of the action sequences were really cool, just the way that they kind of play around with the abilities. So I really like that. I did think that Sokka was a little different from his character in the animated series, which that's kind of to be expected. So I'm curious to see where this goes from there. Which, by the way, I was going to get into this. I do like who they got to play Sokka. Ian Ousley.
I agree. I think he's really good.
He's good. I'm still a little on the fence about Katara and Aang, and I think that's just a product of we got a little bit of time with them. But I think Sokka right now is the one that just is the closest to the cartoon, and I appreciate that. So good for you, buddy. Again, I'm all about I could watch a whole series of Uncle Iroh and him drinking jasmine tea and just dropping nuggets of wisdom. But we're not going to get that because there's a finite amount of audience that would like that. Again, I do have some hangups with him going into the Avatar state as quickly and as often as he did. I get it. He's not in control of it, but I don't know. I don't remember him going into the Avatar state this quickly, this often. But maybe it's because I've only seen the series once, so I don't know. So those are our general thoughts.
Hey guys, guess what? We're bringing back a segment, and it's going to be Nick and Mike's Miraculous Menaginarium.
I'll take you home and lock you in a nice little cage and never, never, ever let you out.
Do you imprison everything you like?
Of course.
He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die.
You're gonna be my new pet.
Not if I get him first.
Oopsie.
In this segment, Mike and I will choose what character we thought stood out to us in the episode we just watched. And I could have sworn there were people in those Menaginarium enclosures, but there are just some weird skin sacks now, and the Moopsie looks rather lonely. So we thought, why not bring back our beloved segment, Nick and Mike's Miraculous Menaginarium attraction. So Mike, who would you put next to the Moopsie from this week's episode?
It really boiled down to a couple people. I really wanted to pick Tornado Lady because I thought that move was really cool. However, I'm going to go with the power of friendship and pick Gyatso because I have a feeling that that's probably going to be the last that we see of him for at least a while. But I think what he has to say about being a good person and being kind, it kind of gave me some vibes of Stanley Tucci's character in Captain America. Be like, you have all this power, but it's the man. It is the person. And that matters a lot in this instance when it comes to power. So I did appreciate that. Plus also his last stand. Gonna use more of that as well, because that guy can move for being what I estimate to be 200 years.
Right.
So that is mine. How about yours?
That is a good pick. This week, I am just gonna go with what I kind of feel is a basic answer, but it's a tried and true one, and it's going to be Uncle Iroh. I think he low-key stole the episode with his insight. You don't think he's a good guy at all, but you can see that he's not a bad guy either. His conversation with Aang was probably my favorite part because it shows that, like, he believes the Fire Nation's doctrine, but also he's not so indoctrinated to it that he doesn't think that there are better ways of going about things. Like he gets it. Like, hey, we're firemen. We combust. That's what we do. We burn things up. We burn hot. We are big emotions. Our way is kind of the best way because we want peace. And like, this is just what we're doing. And, we want to stop the war. We don't want it to keep going. So it's like, you've got a little bit of that, but then he kind of looks at Aang and he's just like, I get it. Peace is the goal though. So we're already pot committed. We're going to see this through to the end. And like, you could just tell there's good in him. And it's not just crazy bad guy stuff. So I like it when my bad guys can be good and also on the bad side. And Iroh, of course, is always one of the best. Plus, he's whipping out his jasmine tea every second he gets. So love him.
Yep.
Uncle Iroh. And I love the actor. Paul Sung-hyung Lee, the guy from Ahsoka and The Mandalorian and Kim's Convenience. Like, just, I like him whenever he pops up in things. So he's a welcome addition to this show.
What do we have coming up next week, Nick?
Our next episode will be a special bonus episode, and we apologize for teasing you with one episode of Avatar and then immediately driving the pod car off the rails. But let's just say you will be awarded for your patience. So please don't be a grouch about it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean, eh? Until next time, please like, subscribe, and remember to take advantage of all your little merchandising opportunities as they come, and share the podcast with someone who might enjoy it. Rate us 5 stars on your listening app of choice, and you can also find us on social media. I'm on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Jagged2319.
I am on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Letterboxd. I changed my Letterboxd name to match all of this to make it easier, and serialized at MLHilty2452. You can also contact the show at geekspeaklouder@gmail.com or on Blue Sky at geekspeaklouder.bsky.social or just by searching Geek Speak Louder the Nerds. join our Facebook group, and now we're on Instagram. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, I know I'm late to the party.
Ba-ba-da-ba.
And YouTube as well. And follow us on Twitter at Geek Speak Loud, because the ER was just too many characters for good old Elon Musk. Until next time, I'm Mike Hilty.
And I'm Nick Farrow. Thank you for tuning in to Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds. Bye, everybody.
Catchphrase.
Yip yip.
Aang, Katara, and Sokka.
Hey, this isn't M. Night Shyamalan's movie. It's Sokka. You pronounce it right.
I'm sorry. Fine. Okay, take two.
Yip yip.
Oh, God. This is the thing that I hadn't even considered. There's a whole extra violent side to earthbending, to bending in general. I mean, and then they get into it in the later seasons with blood bending. Like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's really
That's rough, buddy.
Yip yip.
The theory states that the master sucked the air out of the room with his air bending and they all suffocated to death. That's super dark, but little bit hoping we would see that.
Yip yip.
Chocobos?
Chocobos from
Chocobos.
Final Fantasy. Oh, you never played Final Fantasy?
No, I was too busy,
Having a life.
Yip yip.
When I read that last night, I was like,
Balls.
Yip yip.
Whenever I do trivia, anytime I say something's from 1969, somebody in the audience giggles. So
Yip yip.
People are craving to not be talked down to. I feel like audiences want something that treats them at least on their level. So I don't know.
My counter to that is see the Super Mario Brothers movie.
We can never have nice things.
Yip yip.
Can we call him Appa Proper?
Appa
At some
Prime. Optimus Prime.
Well played.
Yip yip.
This is why Sozin needs a thinker on his team. He needs me. I'm there for you, man. I'm going to get you that Fire Nation rule in less than 20 years if you just, lay out these very few easy to follow steps. If you want to work for the Fire Nation, you got to have hot takes. Ha!
Yip yip.
I cannot believe that with as crazy as people are for Pokemon, that the Avatar animal crossover stuffed animal market never took off.
Yip yip.
Maybe it's because we're not all yogurt from Spaceballs and we don't care about merchandising on the same level. Maybe we just need them to just be all cute and cuddly. That's all.
Maybe. I want to cute and cuddly them myself while I'm watching the show.
Yip yip.
Give me a turtle duck. Give me a penguin otter.
Yip yip.
Because that's the name of the movie.
There is no movie called The Last Airbender. How dare you?
Yip yip.
This is nothing like the Force, because unlike the Force, not everybody can do it.
Oh.
Anybody can use the Force.
Stop it. We're not doing that show anymore. It no longer exists.
Yip yip.
Assume from going forward that if I mention the Force, I mean the real Force, not the made-up Dave Filoni Force.
Yip yip.
Oh, that's what that stands for.
Oh,
Okay.
You got it? That's an if you know, you know.
I'm not gonna lie. I read that last night and I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Okay, whatever.
Yip yip.
I have brought peace, freedom, stability to my new empire.
Your new empire?
Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic.
To democracy! If you're not with me, you are my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolute. I will do what I must. You will try.
Yip yip.